You can feel free to, if more of a conversation and a give and take to see how everybody's doing.
Hi, Cherie. Hi, Cherie.
Hi.
Yes, please feel free to unmute so that it's more of a conversation.
Yeah.
Cherie, this is Dan Bernstein, the journalist, columnist for the Press Enterprise, who's leading the workshop. And Dan, this is Cherie Westwell. She is the Executive Communications Officer for the Chancellor.
Ah, very nice meeting you.
And
Nice
Cherie
meeting you
says-
too.
Cherie says she has like 300 op-ed pieces to
Wow.
write within the next week.
Wait.
So it would be great if you have, the idea today, Cherie, is to sort of take the, I don't know, some topics that you have in mind, and Dan can help with the structure of the op-ed and maybe pieces that you need to. So we do have a guide on the op-eds. Did you get a copy of that? I can email it to you so you can follow.
I don't have that, but it would be great to have that. And specifically, I'm working on op-eds related to economic development, the need for more economic development in the Inland Empire.
Do you have specific sectors that you want to emphasize in the economy?
Yeah, so there were a couple of things that we came up with last week because we wanted to have hooks, right? Like we want to have something interesting. So one of them was something that we might target to the LA Times, which would be the largest, poorest metro is in your backyard. And it would be about how the Inland Empire is primed for investment. And though we currently qualify as being the largest, poorest metro in the top 50, based on both our metropolitan statistical area as well as our GDP per capita, it is improving, and there's reason for it to continue to improve. So that's sort of that's one example. And then also a couple sectors: clean energy, scientific discovery, and then the importance of educational attainment as it relates to economic development.
So it seems that if you're talking about clean energy or some kind of scientific, what did you say, scientific discovery?
Mm-hmm.
Scientific discovery, that sounds like a kind of an interesting concept that you might be able to lead in with an example or a hypothetical, something that would be ripe for discovery and that would tie in with this economy, some kind of a specific example that maybe someone can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
It does.
And do you want to put this in the context of being of the Inland Empire, being of the two-county area, being in this poor metro area? Do you want to put that, the scientific discovery component, in the context of this area is sort of ripe for a lot more investment?
Yes. So yeah, it could be that, or we could even take another angle, which is, and this is something we might target toward one of the Southern California News Group publications. So, and that would be scientific discovery is the key to the Inland Empire's future.
Well, in this this little primer, one thing that that I think is it's pretty obvious, but an op-ed is, it's your argument for why this should come to pass, why the two-county area, this metro area is maybe overlooked and right for more attention. And then if that's your premise, or if that's that scientific discovery is the key to this area, then I think what you have to do in your op-ed is make that argument with some specific examples and some evidence that you have. Why is this area? Why is this the key to the inland empire? And have there been other examples of scientific discovery that have already taken place that show, so this is how it's done, and it maybe couldn't have been done in LA, but here it's being done, and there's opportunities for further development along this line.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is interesting too, because I think you might have to ask yourself who's your audience? Is it who you're trying to convince of this? Are these sort of business leaders or tech leaders, science leaders, or is this a general reader of the LA Times and a general reader of the 11 Southern Cal News Group papers? You know, who are you trying to reach with this? And maybe if it's more than one, you have to kind of keep that in mind. You don't want to get too techy to someone who is a general reader and just wants to know, maybe I haven't even heard of the Inland Empire before. So it's kind of a challenge to decide who your audience is and then pitch it as kind of specifically as you can to that audience.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help at all? Is that
Yeah, it does. Because I think, one of the things you said was it needs to be something that can't be done in LA. So why specifically this area? And there are a couple of arguments to make, both in terms of sort of sustainable discovery, clean energy development in the desert, even some of the ag tech. Those are all things that can't be done in other areas, or can't be done as effectively. So those would be good things to center on.
I think that's a good point. And I assume that you'd be bringing the university's role into this too, right? UCR's role, and how UCR is sort of the engine behind all this.
Yes, for sure. It's kind of the example I like to go to frequently is what they did in North Carolina, in Raleigh-Durham, to create the research triangle there. And it was a very dedicated effort by business leaders in that region who said they didn't want to continue to export their graduates because they were like 49th in terms of personal income per capita. And so they were trying to make a difference by keeping their discovery and their students in that area when they graduated. And so so then they worked very aggressively to create the research triangle. So that's kind of the idea of what scientific discovery can do for a region.
Do you think you could use the medical school as an example of that effort to keep students here, and also I think maybe even use the what is it called, the South Coast Air Quality Management District moving out here?
Yes. Yeah, those are both good examples.
I think that would work.
Okay.
And I think that something like that those examples, I think, would resonate in LA if you did that with the LA Times, because I have a feeling that whenever I talk to people about UCR having a medical school, it just sounds like this huge revelation. They have no idea. I think people just, in a lot of ways, don't really know what to do. Or you can talk up. I think a lot of people think this area is good for warehouses, and that's about it, because it gets a lot of publicity that way, and it had for many years. The cheap land was the calling card. So now I think you're kind of moving beyond cheap land and getting into something, that would appeal to people who wanted to make career, didn't want to live in LA.
If I can add to that, Dan and Sheree, well, the other thing that LA doesn't have that we have are the faculty doing the research, right? So besides having, the big center and the research, what makes us unique is these faculty finding specific ways to improve air quality or energy or improving the environment. And we have plenty of those. So you can say it can't happen anywhere.
Yeah.
It has to happen in an empire because our faculty are researching that, right? The everything from the impact of cattle in the area to the transportation from the warehouses, all of that is being researched here.
Yeah.
And so that's what makes us unique, and that's why it can't happen anywhere else, because our faculty are focusing on that. And that can obviously elevate the university, but maybe you have other people say like, oh, wow, I didn't know they were doing research on that, right?
And even
citrus.
That's, if you're talking about the environment and sustainability, the citrus is.
We're an
long
R1
time.
institution,
Yeah.
people know that, right? And sometimes what I had learned, and I think I shared briefly last week from that one time when I went to grad school and I asked Dan for advice on what to do, he said, write on fact, right? And the fact is that we are a research institution, but he also said, don't assume that your audience knows everything that you're talking about. So just one line that explains that we're a research institution can be like, oh, I didn't know we're a research institution like Berkeley, like other major universities, right? So that to us it's very obvious because we work here and we go to school here, but that might not be obvious to others.
Then you might even get in kind of a little bit about how this, maybe the concept of UCR in the old days was a tiny school and in the shadow of the big one. And at one point I think it was 8,000 students until the regents and a couple of chancellors decided, no, we're going to go bigger. And now it's what is it?
27,000.
27,000. So it's a big time now. So I think that probably if I were writing this, I might not even assume people knew where Riverside was. Just kind of introduce them to the area. Maybe there even be a series, just not just intellectually but culturally what's going on here, because things have changed quite a lot over the last few years.
Well, now that you do a lot of people, and I know this is a bragging point for us, but do a lot of people know that the oranges they consume literally come from Riverside's orchards and research and history, right? And so even throwing in a line that says, you might not know this, but the oranges that sit now either in your backyard, those trees, or the cuties, the halos that you peel. These were all product of the professors that we have here in the empire, right?
That's a great idea. That's something very tangible.
Right. So
You
if
could
you're
even
talking about why it can't happen in LA or New York, that's because we're unique in that way.
You can almost believe this.
Yeah, I like something you said there too about it being in your backyard, because I like that double entendre that you can use with the word backyard.
Good idea. Very good idea.
Those are going to be some great OpEd features for you. I think it wraps everything up until everything we've discussed, right? the research, the first generation, the social mobility. I don't know if everybody understands what social mobility is or does. And I know for all of us who work here and who've heard it so much, it's very obvious, like social mobility, what that means. But maybe there's a way to illustrate it with a student story, Cherie, that says, you know, Sandra was a first generation student, and now, you know, out of her 15 nieces and nephews, 13 have gone to college because she set the way. What does that mean, right? They went from living in this one bedroom apartment with 8 people to now being homeowners. I mean, all of that is a way to illustrate. So maybe if there's a student that you can use, we have tons of student stories who can open up that, what educational attainment means. I think would be really great.
Yeah, I like that too, and sort of the legacy of it, how that creates long-term impact.
How about some of the other folks out there? Do you have any? How's your op-ed piece coming?
Jason and Katie.
Yeah. What sort of? Do you have any questions or? You feel free to unmute yourself and just talk away. It's just a very exclusive club we've got.
Yeah, I guess if I'm speaking for myself, be a bit of a fly on the wall here. I just wanted to try to pick up some techniques, you know, and strategies for just for this kind of form of writing, because it's very unfamiliar to me. You know, I'm in the philosophy department, and I'd always wanted to play with I'm a grad student, but I'd play with the idea of like, how could you write an interesting philosophy op-ed? It's just because it seems like often in philosophy, the idea is it's all about what you don't know. Which is kind of different from say a more scientific piece where you're, you know, expanding on the facts and so on and informing. But I always wondered, I mean, couldn't there be a way to kind of bring the public into the kind of the philosophy world through the op-ed form? And I was trying to think, how could you put the form of the op-ed into something a little more, where it's a more kind of open kind of or a kind of questioning based on what you don't know, in a certain sense, or no, it's the problem, expanding on the problems that can become interesting. Yeah.
I think that's a fascinating question. I think probably one possible tack to take on this is to write about something people do know or think they know about, and then introduce the philosophical underpinnings behind it that they probably had no idea might have led up to that. And that's kind of surprised them with how philosophy is related to the real world. And that could be kind of your very first example could kind of be the thing that pulls people in, and then you can take it down. If you have kind of a list as you're making your point, you could say, you could just go down that list and relate it to your expertise as a philosopher. That might be one way to accomplish that.
We have another grad student, Katie. She says she can't unmute, but she's in the same boat as Jason. She's a philosophy grad student. So the question is there a topic or an idea in philosophy, an issue that you would want to discuss with the world, with the region, depending on what that would be. So philosophy is such a, you know, it's like an umbrella term, right? But what under that umbrella is it that you want to discuss? Is it politics? Is it social welfare? Is it food? Is it family issues, theories of something? So if you can nail down, then maybe Dan can help you, you know, and it doesn't have to be a full-fledged idea, but if you can, you know, think of a topic, maybe Dan can help you sort of think about how to approach it.
Have either of the philosophers heard of David Glidden, former UCI professor? He's retired now. You have?
I don't think I know him. Oh, the name I know, but yeah, I don't know him. Yeah.
Okay, so he's even older than I am, which is saying a lot. But he's a very smart retired philosophy professor, and he wrote several op-ed pages, op-ed pieces for the Press Enterprise back in the day when we had an op-ed page. I think we called it the next to the last page, and that's where a lot of op-ed pieces went. I have a feeling that someone in your department would know how to contact him. He lives in Riverside, and he might be a good resource to, I think it'd be a very good resource to kind of talk how you maybe not just walk the line, but you take a topic and tie it into philosophy. I think he'd be a pretty good one.
Yeah.
Anybody else in the process of writing or thinking about something? What does that say? Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I definitely try to get a line on David. He's a very nice guy. He would be glad. I'm almost positive he'd be glad to talk to you.
Jason, is there an area that your dissertation is sort of gearing toward?
Well,
Okay.
I lean towards the more kind of abstract, like logical, metaphysical topics. So, what's the nature of reality and the nature of reasoning and knowledge and stuff like that. And I always wondered, like, because it's easier to get your grip on topics of justice, right, or politics and so on. But I always wondered if it was, because then there's something, people are very familiar with, right? It kind of fits the model of the op-ed, like we discussed the last time. But I always wondered, like some way to kind of just to kind of even like encourage that sort of questioning, because I think it can be kind of a valuable, like just to open up those kinds of I don't know, if there were to, or I'm not sure. I'm stumbling a bit, but like, what do I want to say? Like, if there could just to kind of show that to show there's something of interest there that lots of people might start to appreciate or something like that. With something like that, where it seems like it's much harder to get a kind of more concrete grip on it. That's what I was playing with. Yeah.
I think
Say it
that's
again, I'm
fascinating.
sorry, the abstract of what question?
Yeah, sort of like with a question about say like what justice is. So so some of my other fellow grad students here, like Andrew's here. I know Andrew works on justice, and I know Katie's working in basically like ethical areas, right? And so you can get kind of, there's a place to get a grip on, right? Real issues, right? And real facts of the matter that are important. But then I was thinking, well, what if we ask a broader question, like, well, what's the nature of reality? And philosophers have asked lots of questions about that, and they come with all kinds of different ideas. Or, the sort of the famous, like, how do you know that there's the cup on your table? Those sort of kind of classic questions that kind of draw people in. I always wondered if like it would be possible to do like a kind of little op-ed series that like could bring, I don't know, maybe it's I don't know if it's a good idea, but it could bring like like the region of like general readers into the fold to sort of be interested in like thinking kind of just about these kind of philosophical questions or something like that about what we can know and what and so on, the truth, the big kind of broader, I don't know, metaphysical epistemological questions, something like that. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I think it's a really interesting subject, and I think that probably for those of us who aren't philosophers, we don't think that way. And I think it's interesting to read something from someone who does think that way. And maybe one way you could do it, you could maybe come up with maybe some sort of examples that are sort of generally accepted in justice, for example, and then challenge those in a way. Why is that? Why do we accept that? Where did that come from? Is there another way to look at it? So something that a reader might approach is, well, this is just very obvious. Of course, everybody knows that. And then to twist a little bit and, make them think about why everybody knows that's right. Why is that right? And maybe you could inject some of the philosophers who you're familiar with, making those kind of questions, because you're right. That's what the questions. There's not an assumption that we know things from a philosopher's standpoint. There's a lot that we don't know. Maybe to take an accepted principle and then try to demolish it, or at least let people think about whether it should be accepted or not. I think that would be. I think you do have to ask yourself though.
Yeah.
you have to, this is an op-ed. If it's an op-ed for a newspaper, this is going to be you're not going to be talking to fellow philosophers, obviously. And so you have to make it really accessible to them. And you have to kind of really watch your terminology, I think, so that people understand. They don't have to go looking up what something is. They have to kind of be able to grasp it quickly, because you're going to be presenting a kind of a unusual, maybe complicated subject in the first place. And so, and also, I think you have to be able to explain to an editor why this is important. Why should I publish something like this? We're publishing X, Y, and Z, and it's really not. It doesn't have that slant on it, which is maybe that's a reason to publish it right there, because it's unique.
Yeah.
And maybe I guess I would come full circle and go back to maybe asking David Glidden what he thought as when he was putting something together for a general circulation newspaper. That might help.
And correct me if I'm wrong, did Carl Craner also write something in newspapers? Actually, I could always ask him. He's in our department too. I know he did public work on yeah, I don't know, maybe Katie or Andrew know. I can't remember if he did.
No, I don't know if it was for newspapers, but I know he's written a lot for like court cases, right? And so
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah.
but if I could chime in, I'm not the op-ed expert, but this nature of reality. Yesterday I was speaking to a professor who's a biologist or scientist, and she said that it just sparked the question that when she gets really stressed over not getting a grant, not publishing a paper, she goes out to her garden and looks at nature and then questions herself. Why is this reality of failure not something that is impacting me, and what around me tells me that that's a failure? And so I was like it just led to this other conversation of like, according to who is this a failure, and who is teaching me that I have failed?
That's interesting.
Health, and when I have like this beautiful environment around me, and I can try again. This is not like it's a one done deal, right?
Yeah.
Like I lost my life or we're not publishing a paper, right? So at what point do I let whomever is talking about failure and triumphs dictate how I feel, and how much of that do I make that my reality? And it just went into this very philosophical conversation, but I feel like maybe you can tie it onto failure and reality of that, and who perceives what reality is when you have failed or when you have triumphed. Like, who defines this, right? Because your failure can be my triumph, right?
Yes. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So that was just an interesting, when you said, the nature of reality, and she was speaking about this, and she was saying that she basically was saying problems are only as big as I let them be. And as much space I give them in my head and in my time, then that's how big they become. And they become nothing if I ignore them and say, I will try again to submit this paper, this grant tomorrow, next year. It was really interesting to just hear her, speak about, and then she went on, we discussed God and, whatever God is. And she was talking about, well, what makes me so special? I mean, there's billions of people on this planet, and why do we think like I should, please God grant me this, whatever it is? Well, what makes you so special? There's like billions of people. Like, what about you? What makes you so special? That this has to be something that needs to happen for you. So what if it doesn't happen? What happens to you? And so all these it was like a lot of questions, but you're like, that's right. So maybe the op-ed can be, this is how we define failure and reality, but at the end of the day is, who are you to discern this, right? And why should you be granted this grant or these shoes or this house or this marriage or whatever, that might be. It's more questions than answers, but still it makes you like, oh yeah, that's right.
And that helps tie it down to something a little more specific too. Here's a something specific about the reality of this thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a particular domain of questioning, yeah, instead of a kind of which might be helpful for like an op-ed, right? Something someone might have actually thought like in their garden or something like that.
Maybe you can help people think about whatever it is, right? Failure, time, engagement, whatever it is, partnership, whatever it is, and
Yeah,
what
yeah.
that really.
Yeah.
But Carl Craner is a great guy to bounce ideas out of too, his experience. I mean, talk about a guy who can see accomplishments and failures throughout his life. And this is I owe him, I'm gonna be writing a profile on him, so that's why I know a little bit about his life. But, this is a man who is closer to, I think, 80, and he climbed Mount Kilimanjaro when he was around 70. I mean, how many of us, talk about whose reality is that?
Yeah, that's really awesome.
Right? My reality is walking a mile. I mean, that's
Yeah, that's amazing.
yeah. Andrew, any ideas on what you would like to write for a future op-ed? Thank you for joining us. CCS? No?
Yeah.
No, all right. What do you study? I don't know if you can unmute yourself, Andrew, but is there an area that you study, or I'm assuming you're a grad student?
Yeah, I'm a grad student, so I just wanted to listen to what you are talking about. I don't have a specific question for today.
Have you done some writing?
Yes, I'm doing, and I have done.
What do you write about and read about?
Currently, I'm working on global justice compensating. So compensatory justice is what I'm working about. I'm working on. Yeah.
Interesting.
Can you explain what compensatory global justice means?
Yeah. I may not specifically talk about, compensatory justice in relation to global justice, but in short, I'm looking at, past evils, colonialism, slave trade, and neocolonialism. So my argument is that those nations that exploited the poor ones should pay back. So that is a summary of what I'm working on. Am I clear, or it's not okay?
Go ahead.
That would be an interesting topic to write about now, right, Dan?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah. Have you had some kind of, have you done a lot of research in that area?
Not as such. I can say half. So I may say I need more, of course. Yeah.
Well, Sandra said there are a lot of, I would say, present day applications to that argument. Everything from reparations.
Exactly. Yeah.
To what's going on in the Middle East. That's a very pertinent, or much discussed subject right now.
Mm-hmm.
So probably if you do decide to write an op-ed, you probably want it would help probably to use examples that people are familiar with, and of course they'll be familiar with both sides of that hot debate. So you would have to kind of make your case, but I would urge you to acknowledge the arguments on the other side, because I think that a lot of these things, I think we probably live in a time now where there's a tendency to grossly oversimplify things, and I think from someone in academics to spot the subtleties about an issue, I think lends to a greater understanding of the issue, even if they don't end up with this is the rock solid answer, I've solved your problem, goodbye. you know, at least makes people think. And that's probably what an op-ed is supposed to do.
I'm mainly working on Africa, so it's mainly Africa. You know, we have this history of colonialism and slave trade. So I would say that my case study is in Africa. Of course, Latin America, I mean, the information and the research is relevant to other countries, but mainly Africa.
Well, that is good. You bring up a good point, and that is to write what you know about, you know, and people will be able to infer from what you write about examples of that kind of issue right here at home or elsewhere. They can make, it wouldn't be hard for them to connect that dots. It wouldn't hurt for you to mention them in passing to kind of give them a cue. But if your expertise and your interest are Africa, by all means, stick with that as your main. That's the guts of your piece, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. We are trying to work on it. You know.
Oh, you're very welcome. My pleasure. Anybody else with any? Has anybody actually started to write something? And are you stuck? Are you having a good time with it? Are you in the rewrite stage, the magical rewrite stage yet? It seems like there's a lot of kind of conceptualizing what you want to write about at this point, which is great because that's the first step. I'll reiterate, you guys seem pretty with it to me, so you've probably already occurred to you, but I would encourage you not to write about anything just because you think you should write about it. I think that's a real trap. I think you should write about something that you want to write about, because that means you know something about it, you're passionate about it, and you have a point of view about it, which is what readers are looking for in an op-ed. They want to see what you think. And then of course they want to see why, they want to understand why you think it. And that's not easy to explain if you're thinking, gee, I really should write about this because everybody's talking about it, or I really should write about it because my buddy at the street or my landlord or my boss said I should write about it. And I speak from experience, learning that lesson the hard way, because readers can tell when you you don't really have a burning desire to get a point across. Readers can tell that you're just going through the motions. So stick with something that you feel strongly about, that you know about. And, you know, even if you don't know everything about it, that's okay too, because that's what your research is going to reveal. That's what you're going to be thinking as you write it. Because you're going to have to be putting your self in the shoes of the reader. You know, what are they getting from what I'm telling them? Am I telling them enough? Am I getting my point across? What else do I have to tell them to make my case? You know, how can I sell the Inland Empire to people who think that LA is it, that LA is just you know, everything else. I used to get kind of annoyed when the LA Times would describe Riverside as on the edge of the desert, which kind of showed to me how they were dismissive they were of the city, of the county, well, the county of course, but the city, and how they really had never been here except maybe to drive to Palm Springs. So I think you just have to ask yourself, if I'm trying to sell, say, for example, Riverside County or the Inland Empire, what do people have to know about this place so I can make my case? Similarly, if you're talking about colonialism or philosophy, you have to educate people as well as argue, and that makes you much more effective, I think. So you have to, and one way to do that is put yourself in the shoes of the reader. Picture your reader reading something that you've written and see if he or she is really getting all the information that you're trying to convey.
I like that, some time ago, I think one of the professors that I was speaking to, he said that when he was writing research papers, that he would always try to picture, this was a professor in the sciences. Could somebody in the arts and dance department understand what he was trying to communicate? Because just because you're a professor or you're somebody who's, you know, has a PhD or a master's, that doesn't mean that you understand, because your world is so much different, right?
Mhm.
Philosophy through engineering, do you
Yeah.
understand what they do?
Mhm.
Probably not, right? And so your job is to explain exactly how Dan suggested. Don't assume that they know,
Mhm.
but explain what you're trying to convey. For newspapers, what did you say was a eighth grade level, fifth grade, sixth grade?
Yeah, sometimes they'll even have, when I've done some looking online of past columns, they'll even say what level, whatever the online service is, they'll say eighth grade level for this story, or fifth grade level for this story. Yeah. And that doesn't mean talk down to them. It just means explains stuff clearly, as if, you know, that you have a lot of knowledge, especially in the university. And you probably speak a different language to your colleagues because, you know, just a whole different vocabulary. But you can't necessarily use that vocabulary when you're writing for a general newspaper. You know, you have to be much more down to earth and clear about what you're saying, because you might lose people, and readers are in a hurry and they don't like to get lost. If they get lost, they just go on to something else. So you really have to make it accessible. I can't overstate that. And it's doable without talking down to them, or writing down to them, which is really dangerous. You'll lose them that way too. One thing that I would encourage you to do, since we're just talking about you haven't started writing yet, but it's really important once you've got something down to take a really fresh look at it. And it's called this is the rewriting process, which everybody hates, but it is so essential. It's essential because your first draft it's not going to be perfect, and it shouldn't be. What your goal is to kind of get something down, get what you want to say on paper or on your screen, and then keeping in mind it's your own creation right there. You're just going to make your own creation a lot better if you take a hard, fresh look at it and look for opportunities to make it maybe shorter. Probably in my case, that's a big one. Make it shorter, take out the excess stuff, make it streamlined, but also make it clearer. Maybe you can use an image that you hadn't thought of before, like the oranges in your backyard or something like that. Maybe that didn't occur to you the first time. And now there it is. People can see that right away. Or maybe there's rather than say colonialism, maybe there's an example of colonialism you can point to and then say, that's colonialism. Make it a human example of what that is. A very human example of what happened when this person subjugated that person or moved in and took over, something like that. But make it a very kind of concise nugget that doesn't use the word, but illustrates your point later on. That makes sense. So rewriting is essential, and you'll love it too. I mean, you're gonna think it's a drag, and sometimes it is a drag, but it really pays off. It really pays off, and it does open new thoughts all the time. So just give it a chance. You know, it's hard because you think you got it perfect the first time, but I'm sure probably at your level of a graduate student, you've probably written a lot of stuff that you've had to rewrite anyway. So you'll be a pro at it already. So just keep it going.
One thing you said last week, Dan, that I really appreciated was, and he gave an example. I don't know if Andrew, if you were in the session. I think Jason, you were in the session last week. Were you? One example was using. It doesn't always have to be very heavy, gloomy type of, right? It can be a little bit light, and it can be a little bit comical. And I don't know that any of the topics that you have, you know, offer that or make for that. But Dan wrote an example of, he provided an example of a column that was more on the light side, and you can use, you know, if naturally that voice comes to you, I think that would be something to explore, right?
Yeah, I think that humor has a good, it's a really good device. It's tricky, but I found that to use it, if you're outraged by something, or you have a really strong opinion about something, the first thing I wanted to do was just bang it out and say, okay, this is what I think, take it or leave it, et cetera, et cetera. But then I would cool off a little bit, and instead of push back against that particular issue, maybe embrace it a little bit, just to show how absurd it is, and kind of go with that, take whatever I thought was offensive, outrageous, and try to play it out logically to what I think was a conclusion that makes it really ridiculous. So it's almost like a Zen sort of thing. You don't push back, you just sort of absorb it and figure out a way to make it a little bit funny so people can say, I see, yeah, that is a stupid idea. So there were a couple of columnists in the old days, a guy named Art Buchwald, who wrote for the New York Times, and he wrote in dialogue. And so he would take a point, and he would be wanting to make a point, but he would do it through dialogue, and he would be interviewing somebody or talking to somebody, and the way the conversation would unravel would show, or would play out, would show how ridiculous the main premise of a particular article was. So there are different ways to address something rather than just head-on preachy. Sometimes I think if people feel they're getting preached at, they kind of tune that out a little bit. So it might be better to take a lighter, if you can see an opportunity to make a lighter sort of thing. You know, even thinking about colonialism, I mean, as bad as it was, there are probably some absurd, kind of almost absurdly funny, ridiculous examples of how bizarre it is and how unfair it is, without kind of hammering it away. But even if people, your reader, are going to say, what, they did that? That's what this was all about? If you can find something like that, I think you've really got your reader. And so that you might consider that humor as a device. So the question there.
Yes, that's right. Preaching versus teaching and writing.
Oh, well, preaching is pretty obvious, don't you think? Fire and brimstone, and I think maybe not. Maybe people are more eloquent at that, but there are some subtle ways to teach someone. I think without being so heavy-handed, and can, at least in my view, I'll put it this way: that was not my style for the most part. I would take a more kind of snarky or sarcastic or satirical approach, and because I think that it gives the reader a little chance to draw their own conclusions rather than being talked at. You know, you can bring the reader along with you, and if you make them laugh a little bit, make it funny, but not funny. Boy, this is, you know, just kind of lighten it a little bit, but they can still see your argument progressing. It's a fine line, but it can be done. I guess I would encourage you, if you're interested in that stuff, to kind of read satire. There's a lot of it out there. And just kind of see if you have the feel for it. If you like it, give it a shot and try it out. And you'll put your own stamp on it. It won't be, you're not going to be copying anybody, but you'll kind of have in your mind how that device works. Yeah. I don't know if you could do that in the chancellor's office. That might be a little tricky.
That might be fun.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
We use humor sometimes, but we have to keep it light, and we have to look at it from every angle before we use it.
Yeah, you do. I think so. And especially because you don't want to say, I was just kidding, if they if they take you literally, you're in trouble. So you're right. You have to be careful. And I'm sure I fell into that before, but I wasn't a chancellor, so people could say, nah, he was just kidding. But probably don't want to put the chancellor in that position.
That is true, that the higher the position, the less of the more scrutiny there is,
Yeah.
right, for the voice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think clever politicians sometimes can pull that off. They've got quick wit. They can say something. I think something comes to mind, but they can say something that is sort of wry, and disarming, and people know they are just kidding, but they're making their point.
Chancellor Wilcox does a lot by being self-effacing, like that works too.
Yes, very much so. Yes, self-effacing, self-deprecating. I can't do that, but if he can, or she can, yeah, that's a very good way to do it. And that kind of makes you a little bit more human too, I think. I think people can identify, gee, if the chancellor can make fun of himself, wow, he must be, he's not living in that ivory tower after all. So I think that's a very good device. And I'm not saying he's living in, for the record, I'm not saying he's living in an ivory tower. This is being recorded.
This is being recorded.
Okay. Anybody else have a question or?
If I can throw in a plug, our office for the grad students, we're there if you need somebody to read your draft at any point. I think Dan last week encouraged, to have some sort of a draft going. If you at any point feel like, hey, then next week it's going to be a little slow, I should contact University Communications and see if there's anybody on that team who can sit with me and be willing to look at my draft and see if they can offer me a few points or invite us to your classroom. There's 5 of us who can come in and sort of help you untangle, your op-ed or the idea of it. So please feel free to reach out to University Communications. I should plug in, I don't know, my email is there. Have my email there, but if I'm not available, one of my colleagues will. So at any point, we're happy to help.
Yeah.
And once you are more advanced in your research, our office is always looking for experts to send to media. So some media outlet will come back and say, hey, I need somebody who can talk to me about, what reality is. I don't know, some sign, some journal. And if you're already there, then we can coach you on how to prepare for an interview with, with media. That can all be part of it. Once you have more research, more years on colonialism, we can discuss that and how do we address that. English professor Jolandra Davis was writing about Black mermaids, for example, and that journey they made from Africa into the US and how now all of a sudden we have a little mermaid, so she made that connection of historical content into sort of science fiction. And she had a lot of really good media coverage for that. So we worked with her on that as well. So anyway, just something for you to consider as you move on in your academic career.
Yeah.
And Cherie, we're around the corner if you don't know where we're at.
I know how to find you.
Well, I think it's great that you're interested in writing, in doing this kind of work. It's kind of a stretch, I think, probably from your academic background, but I think Sandra's right. I think people, if you can introduce general readers to your line of thinking and open their eyes, I think that's be a great service to them, and also it enhance the reputation of the university too. And so it's a kind of a win-win thing. So the fact that you're even willing to tackle it is great. And don't, I remember when I first started writing my column, there was one of my colleagues was standing behind me, just the very first column I wrote. He was standing behind me as I was at my computer, and I pushed the send button, this bright red send button. And he said, well, that's one. So, and that was not probably a great one at all, but it's a start. So I guess what I'm saying is keep at it. You might not be, might not be the master of the op-ed right out of the chute, but you get the hang of it. If you've got these opinions that keep coming and you want people to know what's on your mind, and you want them to think about something in a way they haven't thought of before, I think that's enough of motivation for you to keep it up, keep trying. And by all means, do not hesitate to show it to other people who will be honest with you, people who you trust, but people who will be honest with you and say, this is pretty good, or this is okay, but you lost me here, because you want to know better to find out how the reader reacts at that stage rather than to pitch it to an editor when you think it's done and polished, and have this sort of have it rejected for reasons you don't know, when you in the back of your mind are thinking, well, maybe I could have made this better. What I should have could have done this, and you didn't. So I think there are a lot of steps to go through, and just keep at it. And I think it'll be rewarding. I think you'll see the progress. I really do.
I think we're out of time now, so thank you, everybody. If nobody else has a question or a comment for Dan, thank you so much for attending. Really appreciate you spending an hour with us.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
hopefully- And I'm not gonna say I hope you learned. I know you learned something from Dan.